Live as he takes a few questions as they provide an update in Brampton over the city's response to the tariff threat.
What is your stand on this, Mayor?
So I think you've touched a number of topics there, so I'll do my best to respond. In terms of the provincial and federal parliaments not sitting, the governments still function. And so the parliaments sit for a duration of each year, but the government still function. The ministers and the prime minister, the premiers and the cabinet ministers can still act. In terms of your concern about the border, I do think there's additional work Canada can do to secure the border. There's a $1.3 billion border and action plan. I also believe that we can do a lot more at the ports. You know, we've been very outspoken about the ports here in Brampton. We saw that with the auto theft sector. I know there's issues with drugs at the Vancouver port, and of course any additional security would be something we would support. Having said that, you cannot compare where the threat's coming from. There's more fentanyl that comes into Canada that goes out of Canada into the U.S. The guns and drugs that come into Canada come from south of the border. The issue the U.S. has is with the border with Mexico, not the Canadian border. And so, you know, of course, I don't want to see any fentanyl, but this is going to hurt the U.S. This is going to hurt Canada. It is a tax, and when you try to tax businesses, you just make all the businesses less competitive. It's why today we're saying we really want to see a focus on diversifying our trade exports. We're too dependent on the U.S., and if you have an unstable leader in the U.S. taking actions that will hurt American and Canadian businesses, we need to be able to pivot. And let me give you an example. It was just a few weeks ago, we had some economic development agencies in the Middle East ask about accessing our steel sector and poultry sector. The challenge is shipping it there. But there's an example of an opportunity that we should be exploring. There are opportunities for Brampton businesses, for Canadian businesses around the world. You know, in the early 2000s, Canada signed many preferential trade agreements. We have access to many markets in the world. I think just because of geography, we've been a little bit lazy in depending on the U.S. free trade agreement. And I think now is the time to step up, to be resilient, to be creative, to be innovative, to think outside the box and target those new markets.
And about wasteful spending, as I mentioned, that $5 billion to Ukraine, what is your stand on that?
So right now, the Parliament of Canada, all the parties have supported motions to stand with Ukraine against Russian aggression. So I don't think whether the Parliament was sitting or not sitting, that would change. There's been a very clear indication from all parties in the federal Parliament that they believe Canada should be an ally to Ukraine. I would note in Brampton, we've had over 300 Ukrainian refugees that have resettled in our community and have been a great addition to our Brampton family. I can't even imagine the horrors of what they've had to see back home. And we had a Ukrainian flag raising just a few days ago at City Hall to express our solidarity. And of course, I think everyone in Brampton hopes that peace is achievable as soon as possible. But you know, those discussions are certainly abstract and at a very far distance from the municipal conversations we have.
What coordination are we looking at between the three levels of government towards the tariff, the response to the tariff?
So I would say there is a high level of collaboration right now. I was at a big city mayor's meeting in Ottawa with the Prime Minister, with Dominic LeBlanc and Melanie Joly, where we're trying to get everyone on the same page. We have an Ottawa mayor's meeting today on the same discussion. We had an Ontario big city mayors with senior levels of government attending just a few weeks ago. And so just like we saw during the pandemic, there's a higher level of collaboration than we'd be accustomed to. Having said that, what we're calling on in Brampton today is to really get assistance in targeting new markets. There's two fronts to this challenge. One, trying to change the decision in the U.S. to make sure they understand and that we use every effort we can to make sure they don't follow through with this destructive policy that will hurt American businesses and hurt Canadian businesses. But just, we can't depend on our ability to change the president's opinion. I think at the same time we need to be working just as focused, just as energetically on adopting new markets for businesses, because this could be here for 4 years. If it's here for 4 years, I just can't even imagine the economic destruction that would take if we haven't been able to identify new markets.
And are there any new markets specifically?
It's Brampton Mayor Patrick Brown at a news conference this morning where they were talking about the city of Brampton's response to the proposed Trump tariffs, which look like they could be coming into effect next week. Of course, that news conference over to is taking questions from a variety of different media there from different situations. But again, just identifying and reiterating the need and the urgency around the potential Trump tariffs.
And calling for, support and resources so that they can target new markets as well. Exactly. We also spoke with Patrick Brown, Mayor Patrick Brown, earlier in the show. Turning to this now, we've been following